This is the Ecom Edge podcast, and I'm your host, Sergio Iacobucci, Director of Product Marketing at Coveo. For all of us in e-commerce, there's a certain thrill that comes from adopting the latest innovations. From peeling back the layers of different technologies to getting inside our customers' heads and providing them with profitable shopping experiences that competitors can't match. And without a doubt, it seems to be that Amazon continues to be the 800-pound gorilla that lords over most of retail. So how do you survive in a very large shadow that Amazon creates? Today, we're going to discuss all of that. And I'd like to welcome back Cate. She's been a guest on our podcast before. She's a top 100 retailer, influencer, and head of trends at Insider Trends. Cate was great on our last podcast about being provocative in the world of retail and making us think about how it could change forever. So, Cate, I'm hoping you're going to do the same for us today.
I hope so too.
Yeah, I'm sure you will. And so for our listeners that haven't had the chance to tune into the previous episode, could you just briefly introduce yourself and what it is that you do?
Sure. So, yeah, I head up the team at Insider Trends. We focus on the future of retail. And our strapline, which I clearly need to practice, is we deliver omnichannel strategy and innovation that actually makes clients money. I can expand on that if you want, but we do that through consultancy, through workshops, presentations, innovation programs. The idea is that we have all this expertise in our heads that we can share with retailers, however suits them best.
Yeah, and we've spoken before, and you've taken us through like the fact that you decided to set up two businesses at the same time. Obviously, there were some similarities between the two, but two at the same time seems like madness to me. What kind of put you to do that? All at once, and where did you land in the end when it came to those businesses?
I set them up because I decided I wanted to. I realized that I wanted to become a trend scout, and at that point, there didn't seem many exciting people to work for in London. So I thought I'd have a stab at it myself. And I think the two businesses came about from trying a few different things and finding that they both worked to a certain degree, which is kind of good. It was a lot of work, which is why I only run one of them now. But yeah, I think one of my biggest drivers is finding new ways to do things, helping retailers realize that their life can be easier, that they can make customers happier, they can make more money, that type of thing. Essentially, retailers don't need to struggle as much. So hopefully I make life a little bit easier for them and a bit more exciting too.
And we're going to try and be exciting today and kind of really look into the future of retail. We're looking at we've not gone too far on the horizon, but we're looking to 2035 because we think that's kind of far enough in the distance that we can talk about some really interesting stuff that really is going to change, but not so far that anyone listening to this is like, well, that's never going to apply to me. So I think 2035 kind of feels just about right. So you talk about that, I think, in one of your presentations as well, around roughly this timeline of 2035. What sort of mega trends do you see coming our way?
Well, I feel like that was a slightly old talk, maybe the 2035 one, because actually it feels quite foolish to say that you can predict the future that far ahead. I would say one of the biggest forces influencing what will happen between now and then is the exponential rate of change with technology and the fact that all these individually accelerating technologies are going to start interacting with each other or overlaying on each other even more than they are now. So then you get exponentials over exponentials, which becomes quite mind-boggling. And I don't know if you know this, but Ray Kurzweil said that in 2029, we're going to see the singularity, which is when a computer is going to be as smart as a human in every way, pretty much.
2029?
2029. So 2035 is 6 years after the singularity. So
that scares me.
In 2029, you might not be interviewing me. You might be interviewing a computer, and you wouldn't even know. That can, go and take all this information, not just from the internet, but from all these other objects and devices, and I don't know, people all around the world
and
as
just
well.
be
So
a
anyway,
super brain. Yeah.
exactly.
That,
so I
that
think
would
is
be.
the
I don't know what that conversation would be like. Be interesting to see what it would be like to talk to a machine in like 8 years time or whatever it would be. But yeah, I'm sure things are moving at a very impressive rate. And you said that there's pieces of technology that are kind of moving exponentially, and they're going to all converge basically at one point. What technology comes to mind when you're saying that? Are there buckets in your head of these areas?
Yeah. So, I mean, AI is probably the big one, but then we've got the Internet of Things and sensors and cloud computing, which partly crunches all that data. There are things like 3D printing, which at some point will become much more viable, nanotechnology, smart materials. Yeah, and all of those technologies are possibly going to invent or aid other ones.
Of course.
So, and green technology as well, sustainable energy, free energy. So things are about to get a lot more interesting. And I think another way of slicing this might be to say that the field is widening. I know we talked about this last time. We talked about how some retailers can stay super traditional and others are at the bleeding edge and actually making that work for them. I think the gap between generations is widening as well. We're seeing completely different attitudes and behaviors from the youngest people or people in certain parts of the world compared to the oldest people in other parts of the world. So that's also interesting, that it's getting really hard to stand in front of an audience of 1,000 people and confidently feel that you can be relevant to everyone because everything is widening so much. It's really about retailers focusing on their audience and their right technologies and their right next steps more than trends for 2022 or whatever, or looking at what other retailers are doing. Each company needs to do what's right for them.
Yeah, of course. That's almost like if they do have distinct segments of people they need to speak to, it's almost like running, say they had 4 really distinct segments. It's almost like running 4 entirely different businesses. And it makes me wonder if that's even possible. Like, can you run 4 different businesses within what is a large entity already? Because everyone always seems to flow with what is the main thing within that business anyway. Like maybe there's a dominant segment. So actually the business really works like that. And then everything else is adapted for the other segments based off that. Yeah, that must be very tricky for retailers to kind of figure that out.
Yep, totally. So yeah, I'm very impressed by what they're achieving. So it's definitely not easy. That's
for sure. And we spoke about this, I think, very, very briefly on the last episode. Obviously of emerging trends, and it's relatively recent that Facebook renamed itself to Meta. They're looking at the metaverse and putting a whole host of resource into that. What do you think that has to do with? How will that impact retail? Like how, and will it be within this time frame? Are we looking within 2035 for this to genuinely be something that's impactful?
I think it can be sooner, actually. I think maybe in the next couple of years, we're going to see some brands do some really interesting things that I work well, I think. But it's going to take a lot longer for the mainstream to get on board. But it'll possibly be faster than we think, because some of these 3D immersive digital stores are actually quite affordable to make. They're a lot cheaper than building a physical store or opening a physical store. So actually it might be faster than we think. And I'm really excited about the possibilities, to be honest. I feel like everyone's a bit sick of it before it's even begun, partly because Facebook or Meta are on it. But actually, if we put that to one side, if you think about the possibilities, it means that brands can really connect with the essence of what their brand stands for. And they can bring that to life in a way that doesn't really have to be constrained by physical requirements or financial requirements. So I was interviewing someone about the metaverse, a metaverse company, and And they were talking about running an event for Red Bull, where as part of it, you could drink a virtual Red Bull and it would give you virtual wings and you would go flying, which I know isn't something you would want to do every day, but that just seems quite magical and amazing to me. And something, I don't know, I was thinking about the most exciting, scalable initiative I've seen from Red Bull in a store, and that was a fridge with a digital screen on the front. And it was cool, but it wasn't this complete wow experience. But actually, I can imagine, if you drink this virtual Red Bull and you start flying, that actually is going to make some connections in your brain that you just could never get in a physical store.
Yeah,
and it can be quite affordable.
Yeah, it brings the fun back in, right? It's quite like, it's almost like there's a childlike element to that engagement with the brand, where you get to experience something, as an adult that you wouldn't normally get the chance to do. And it takes away the boundaries of the physical world, I guess, and makes it into something that, you can experience that would never be possible. I think,
I'm really excited about it.
Yeah, I think it could be really interesting. Brands will need to come up with things, right, that kind of work within that world. And I think that, they'll have to kind of forego what how they're used to thinking and rethink themselves entirely if they want to, because it's kind of like a blank canvas, which is hopefully exciting for retailers,
and a chance to be really creative for the first time in decades, possibly, or in a way that they've never been able to before. Yeah,
exactly. Talking about like that kind of trajectory and people moving in a new direction, do you have anyone who's front of mind, who's like an impressive retailer? You think they're going to be really impressive by 2035? They're kind of making the right calls at the moment, and you would back them?
Okay. My easy answer is that possibly the leaders of 2035 don't even exist yet. Maybe we can have a guess, but things are moving so quickly. We can expect someone to come out of nowhere and amaze us all and be the major retailer of 2035. But I love Nike. It seems like everything that Nike do is both really creative and forward-thinking, but actually works really well with their audience. I'm sure not all of it does, but that's almost the point, that they're experimenting with different things. But if you want to get a clue on what might happen next in a particular space, go and see what Nike are doing with it.
So what have you seen from them? Like what is it that's caught your eye?
So one of them, simpler ones, possibly focuses on the store. They've got their members app for the store now. So that's a slightly different take on loyalty. So anyone who has the app is considered a member. And then when you go into the store, that unlocks prizes. I went into one store and they had a claw machine that was giving away socks and backpacks and things, but you could only play that if you were a member. But then the app also lets you scan a QR code by a mannequins, and you can instantly see what it's wearing, what sizes are available in the store, what sizes are available online. I think you can ping the store and ask that certain items are brought to a fitting room for you. You can self-checkout through the app. And it just, seems very useful in a way. And then, of course, once you've got the app in your pocket, they can communicate with you wherever you happen to be, if you're in the store or not. So they've got that constant connection with the customer that I think is going to become even more important. But some other stuff they've done, they have had some augmented reality shoe drops. So instead of saying, come to the store at this particular day and time, they say that we've dropped this particular shoe in this park, go and find it. And there are videos of these young men like running through the park to be the first to collect this shoe. Or they've launched limited edition shoes one of them was with a restaurateur, but instead of, I think they did drop the shoes in their stores, but they also dropped them in his restaurant. So by scanning the menu with your phone, it actually unlocked the shoe and the ability to buy it. So
Okay,
it
great.
actually makes more sense to me to sell the product in the space that the shoe is, or the product is more connected to, really, than telling everyone to go to a shop. So yeah, I've learned a lot from Nike. They've really opened my mind as to what is possible in terms of retail. And they're just going to keep doing it. They've got that culture of innovation. It's in their bones, in their DNA. So I love it.
And
can I tell you another one?
Yeah.
Should I tell you another one?
Quick, do you know what? You just reminded me though of like saying grown men running through a park chasing after a augmented reality shoe reminds you of Pokemon Go. Like straight away, that's what comes to mind. I remember seeing lots of grown men and women running around trying to catch Pokemon in New York when I was there last. But yeah, go for it. Or what's the next thing the other thing that Nike impressed you with?
The other one that they've experimented with, I mean, they're always experimenting, but they had a limited edition sneaker that had a chip in it. And when you scanned that chip with your phone, it would unlock the right to buy other limited edition sneakers.
Okay.
It was just so creative and amazing. So that's something else, like, I think it's going to take a while for that to take off, but I'm really excited about chipped products and putting the product at the center of the ecosystem rather than the store, rather than always making it the store, let's say.
Yeah. And I think what when you kind of explain how Nike do all of that stuff within their store, they're doing quite a good job there of blending. We spoke about this a bit in the last episode, but good job of blending digital and in store, at the same time, because you're kind of using a phone as you would if you weren't even in the store, but then they've got they're actively giving you access to stuff because you're giving them data. You're saying, I'll become a member. That's fine. You can then track me and give me information about the brand, but they're giving people stuff back for that, be it a machine, something they win out of a claw machine or, a better experience in store. It's a clever way of blending those two worlds, because then I suppose you're kind of spreading your bets a little bit as well. Like you're making sure that you can engage and touch that customer at any point that you need to. And like you said, if you end up with if you orientate around the product and then make it so that, the product can be anywhere, then that brings it beyond the physical location of the product in the store or on your phone. It's like, actually, yes, as you said, it's in a restaurant somewhere, which is a very unique way to showcase product that I think people probably haven't all thought of.
Yeah. And I think both Nike and Adidas now, like their app is pretty much at the center of their growth strategy for each of them. So it's always interesting to go along and see what they're each experimenting with. So yeah.
For sure. And they have such a loyal, and they have such a loyal customer base as well. And I think, that helps a lot. When people are locked in, they have great loyalty. I know Adidas has a great loyalty scheme, very clear tiers of where you can move to, points and how to achieve that, how to get that. It's very travel, like we get that a lot within your airlines, and it gives you a sense of status within that brand and you unlock things for it. And I think that's another interesting element is like gamification of retail, and all that kind of brings that fun to it. It brings that element to it that's a bit more enjoyable rather than just transactional as well. Do you think the you picked on Nike, and I think it's a great example. Do you think what they're doing is what retailers should be copying? Obviously within reason, but copying what they do to put them on path to be a great retailer for 2035? Is it something anyone can copy, or do you think there's something about those businesses that makes it possible that they do it first and they'll be the best at it?
I don't think it's about copying anyone at this point. I think it's about brands working on themselves to start with, making sure that they have an innovation mindset, that they're rewarding their employees to genuinely focus on innovation, focusing on the learnings, even if something doesn't work, celebrating what they experiment with rather than what works, I guess, and working out where they need to be. So I think Nike are amazing in terms of how bold they are, but I don't think I have to say, even some of the things they're working on, could be improved a bit more. Like, I don't feel they've got it right just yet, but you can see the seeds of something amazing in there.
Yeah.
So yeah, they're making the most headway out of most big retailers, let's say. But yeah, I think it's just
coming
about
down to their culture. You think the culture is where that's stemming from completely?
Totally, yeah. And them almost, I think some of it is them wanting to get headlines through some of their innovation initiatives, possibly. But at the same time, they're learning what works. But they're just a lot braver than most companies, and possibly they have more money than other companies too. So yeah, but it all comes down to the culture and the mindset, really, at the end of the day.
Yeah, for sure. And to kind of bring this into a slightly different angle, and again, we touched on this ever so slightly in the last episode, but do you agree with the concept of an experience economy? And do you see that as a true concept that we can all hinge on? And if so, if not, then yeah, why not? But if so, where do you see us heading with that?
So I think we can talk about reasons for and against the experience economy. So I think actually a lot of meaningful growth and change from retailers has actually come by focusing on convenience and by removing friction from the experience. So I guess that is an experience. A lot of this depends on how we're describing the term experience economy, to be fair. But I think most people, when we talk about experience, it's not so much about just stripping everything back. And I guess Amazon has one of the best customer experiences, but you could easily argue that they don't really have an experience at the same time because it's so dry and functional. But it works really well. So yeah, I think we've actually seen a lot of growth in like discount stores and convenience stores, very functional stores, things, again, that we wouldn't really consider experience. But at the same time, we have seen some brands focus more on their experience. And part of that might be because there is now so much similarity between product quality and price that I, in some ways, think a lot of brands are thinking more about sustainability, because that's one way that they can differentiate, that they, to separate all these comparable products that they weren't able to before. So, yeah, and I think experience might be another side of that too. So, but I don't think I think people are still buying products. I still think we're all buying possibly too much stuff. So we're not all focused on experience as much as some of these trend reports would tell us.
I think, you saying we need to define experience, I think that is a very key part to it. I think my opinion would be that everything, be it what you do and what you don't do, is part of the experience too, right? So, you say like the kind of dry Amazon experience, and I would agree it is quite like that. But it's very functional, and the bits that I don't want to get into my way don't get in my way, and the bits that I do want a bit more engagement, I can get it if I want to. I think that is part of the whole experience, and I think that there's elements of like you need to decide which bit of your brand do you want to be in their life, and which part do you not want to be in their life. And it is true, like redoing delivery, working out how long it's going to take. If they don't deliver, does it go next door? All this kind of stuff. I don't want too much to do with that. I just kind of want that to work, and I want it to be as seamless as possible. But then when it comes to me finding something or trying to understand the product catalog that they have, that is where I want the brand to start to help me more, like start to become more of like front and center of mind when I'm engaged in that moment. So that I feel like they're guiding me through that process. Amazon is a good example of someone that has a lot of products, but then there's a lot of retailers out there that also have significant amounts of SKUs, and it might not be that retailer's tastemaker like we spoke about in the last episode. Lot more logistics, but that logistics experience is still super important. If I type in my product name and it doesn't come up when I then search, that's an awful experience, and I'm just going to be annoyed by that. Like that doesn't help the brand at all in any way. But it is a very functional thing that should work. So yeah, I think it's all elements of it. And I think there's probably certain brands maybe you can make more of an experience of, and somewhere they just need to mostly be in the background, and it's about great product and good returns policy and all this kind of stuff that helps alongside that. And when it comes to the experience, this concept of an experience economy, there's things you have to know about the customer, and we spoke about this a bit before. Like, you have to know about the customer to give them that experience. Are you seeing any trends when it comes to data and data sharing of customers? Because this is going to be a huge part, right, of 2035. If data isn't a huge part of 2035 retail strategy, then I'd be very, very surprised. And what are you seeing there in terms of trends or any interesting concepts on data sharing for customers?
Yeah, well, I think a lot of the ability for retailers to personalize and use data well comes from the amount of data that they have access to. And I think that's actually a challenge for a lot of them at this point. If you go onto a website for the first time or the second time, even with the best will in the world, that retailer can't really personalize that much to you. So yeah, quantity possibly might be the thing to focus on. But I think something I've been looking for, a digital data passport type service for a long time, actually. And there's a project from Tim Berners-Lee that I think the BBC are working on at the moment, or they're working with it. It's the BBC one is called My PDS. It stands for My Personal Data Store, I think. And instead of the BBC just observing what you do when you interact with them, they have created this kind of passport that enables a customer to say, yes, please call in all my information from the BBC, but also call in all my information and behavior from Netflix and ASOS and Spotify and any other brand you would care to mention. And with all of that, the BBC and any other brand that this customer would care to share their data with can get so much more information. And then I think the customer only shares their data with the brands that they trust, but those trusted brands are able to serve that customer far better. And it just seems like the biggest win-win. I'm also waiting for a retailer to let customers set missions or things they're actively looking for. So, I mean, the one that always comes into my mind is the fact that I have massive feet. And so whenever a wedding is coming up, I panic because I can never find shoes that match that also fit me. I have to make a choice at that point. And I would love to be able to just load like some of the things I need to buy onto a list and have a retailer bring solutions to me. That is my dream. And obviously when the customer wins, the retailer does as well. So I'm looking forward to seeing who builds that first.
And in that scenario, are you saying, because I've heard of similar concepts to this, and I think it's a really interesting space, but are you saying that the brand would never own, I know they don't really in legal forms, but own any of that data, that would always be with the consumer, and then they actively share it when they need to? Is that what you're saying? And then the brand uses it and then they kind of retract it again? Is it like that?
I think so. It might be that everything you do on, say, ASOS is maybe on ASOS's servers, but your PDS system can access that. But it's not that every brand automatically can access and own everything. It puts the customer far more in control.
Yeah. And then, like you say, it's win-win, because then the brand also gets more information about that customer than they would have ever been able to garner from, whatever sources they have. It sounds like a data minefield of complexity and everything, but we are heading I agree. I think we're definitely heading in that kind of direction where the data is the consumers today, because they can revoke it, right? But it's not really. It's kind of like it's lent to someone on their behalf for a bit, and then you can ask to have it removed if you want to. But I think it's a great idea. I think it's very likely to happen. It's just creating systems to make that possible. I think also what I've seen from a Coveo point of view is that over the last few years, we've had more and more customers that work with the brands that we work with who are willing to give away information in order to get something back for it. And that's kind of like the Nike one. I'm going to become a member, you give me something back. But there's a lot you can infer about people from a behavioral point of view, how they act and what they do and what they search for. But you can also ask them stuff. You can ask them questions and say, are you looking for this? Or is it this kind of evening that you're going for? And then they can explicitly answer yes, or I'm looking for something for work, and that changes that dynamic of what that data is, rather than implied and kind of, driven from a whole host of behavioral stuff. It's them saying to us, yes, it's definitely workwear that I'm looking for, so that we can immediately turn around and personalize that. And I think that's quite interesting that's already come about. And I think people are very free and willing to do that part. And that paves the way, I think, for them having a load of data that is theirs, that is explicit, that they explicitly share and then can take back if they want to. And I think the way the privacy laws and everything are going, it probably is that direction at some point as well.
Yeah, but I think when we start to imagine putting like our health data in there, or our financial data in there too, like it starts to get really interesting.
Yeah.
And again, it's probably easier to imagine like ultra personalized solutions being offered more in a website or digital first environment than a store one. Again, I'm trying to imagine how a store would respond to all your health information.
Yeah, it's not dynamic
eloquently.
enough.
I'm sure it can be done.
Yeah,
I'm sure it can be done. But
But when you do start thinking about those kind of data sets, privacy is the top concern, right? Is you have to make this super secure, super at the will of the customer. Otherwise, you're never going to gain the trust for someone to hand over their health data to a brand that they're engaging with for the first time. There needs to be a lot of trust there, and working out the mechanism for that, I think, could be challenging, but it's possible. And I think as long as you give something in return, I think that's all customers want. They just want to know, what am I going to get back in return? Why is this going to make my life better? And if you can prove that, then they're normally up for it. With this, like us looking into 2035, whether that's far away enough or not, or whatever, but have you seen any industries outside of retail that are kind of on like a better trajectory? Like you think maybe they don't have like the baggage, as it were, of stores and all this kind of stuff. But is there any sector, could it be like travel or e-gaming or anywhere where you think they're doing something interesting and retail could borrow a few ideas from there and start applying that to their models?
Yeah, well, fashion certainly is looking to gaming so much at the moment. That's, again, some of these interesting metaverse opportunities are being based on gaming engines, and a load of these luxury retailers are selling things through games or gaming sites. So that, I think, is one space. So I've taken up Roblox. This is my not so secret hobby, but just to try and see what's going on. So
are you hooked on it?
I'm hooked on, there's a Vans game, Vans skateboarding. I do like that. But I noticed my 5-year-old next door neighbor with a Roblox backpack yesterday, and I thought we should talk about Roblox together. Anyway, so gaming is a big one. I think, sorry if this is a cliche, but just tech in general, I think, is the big one, because almost every industry now, of course, is going to be basing itself on tech. I would argue that the leading retailers of 2035 are going to be more like tech companies than retailers, possibly. So starting to really think about what different systems there are and what you can do with those would be a good place to start. But the other thing to say with all of this, I think, is that the really exciting brands blend the human and the tech really well. there's a company I love called LaFleur, where their stores are so high tech, they don't feel at all high tech. They look more like a dream apartment than a high tech space. So actually, I don't think the store of the future is necessarily filled with screens. I think it actually might be really relaxing. And yeah, it might have a small fitting room if it's a fashion store, but you won't have to walk up and down aisles and aisles of stuff, because that frictionful experience, that's probably not a word, but never mind, experience which has a lot of hassle in it will actually have been removed, because there will be so much great working technology in and around the space. So yeah, it's that blend of the tech and the human, I think.
What is it that brand do to make it feel so I know you're saying it doesn't feel like tech, but what is going on in the background that is high tech with that experience?
Sure. Yeah, so that's, I think, really driven by CRM. So when you can either book an appointment in the space or just arrive and check in. And at that point, they will be able to see everything you've browsed and bought online or offline up until that point. And they'll also be able to see, that your size, colors that you like or colors that you've rejected. And based on all of that, they will put together a personalized fitting room for you. So you can just walk into that fitting room, try a bunch of things on. You can have a styling session with one of their stylists. They don't really have staff who are there to transact. They're more there to advise and guide people and serve them lovely drinks. And then at the end of all of that, you're given the option to either take your items away with you there and then, or have them delivered to your office or home. Yeah. So the tech isn't in your face. I'm sure you'll see a staff member holding an iPad at some point, but actually you relax in a beautiful sofa. You can flip through a wonderful coffee table book while you wait. It doesn't feel high tech at all. No, I think it's amazing.
No, I love that idea. And do you know, I think that links really nicely with the fact that when you think about your engagement that you have with a brand today, you do really see almost every engagement as entirely separate. So you could go into into two stores on the same street for the same brand. You'll start that conversation, say you need something or you're looking for help with a product or whatever. You'll start that conversation again completely from the start, as if it's a brand new company almost that you talk to. But the same applies for online and in store, right? Like you have a complete engagement with a brand, and maybe you predominantly shop online. So there's been loads of transaction happening, be it actual commerce transaction or your behavior, them giving you stuff, serving you recommendations, et cetera, et cetera. But then as soon as you hit in store, and this is obviously what these guys have nailed, as soon as you hit in store, you reset. Like everything is exactly as it would be for the average customer, which is, doesn't work really for anyone. And then you have to start all over again, trying to find the stuff, work out if it's the same thing that you saw online. That's a great way of blending those two things, where it's like, I have had a relationship with you before, and they are treated so separately as channels that it basically, I don't think I've ever had an experience where it feels that way. I suppose the only obvious one is like click and collect, where you buy online, pick up in store. Feels like, there's some sort of connection between what I did there happened in store. But I think that's probably about it. I don't think I've ever experienced one that does what those guys do. Sounds amazing.
Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see if that takes off. I've been quite obsessed with the idea of checking into a store for quite a long time, and it hasn't taken off as fast as I thought it would. But I don't know. I still think the idea of walking into a store, checking in and seeing any digital screen change what it shows according to who you are, and again, what you've told your digital passport that you want, that I think is extremely exciting. I would love to see that.
Yeah, so that's great.
We'll have to see how this plays out.
Yeah, I think it'll be very interesting. And obviously we're trying to look into the future here in quite a long way. And there's a lot, like you said, there's so many things moving at exponential pace. How how they all collide, we don't actually, we can't really tell. But I think I agree, it would be very interesting. If I was a retailer sitting listening to this now, thinking about, my strategy and what I should think about doing, or the conversations maybe I should start having at some point, I think I might be a little bit confused as to like, where do I start? Like at what do I back a certain area of this? If it's a cultural thing, how do I go about, potentially changing the culture within my department to try and be a bit more innovative and change the way in which we work? But is there anything any advice you could give to someone who's listening to this right now to kind of say, what should they think about focusing on first? Is there an obvious start to this, or ask some questions in a particular way first and then move on from there? Because they're going to have to go outside their comfort zone, I think, to really think about what 2035 is going to be like. So what's your thoughts on that?
I think I've got a lot of thoughts about this, but let's see.
That's good.
So, one of them is, what are your objectives? So I guess if you're not at the top of a retailing business, then maybe your objectives are more to think about short-term profit making. And I was actually, I have to say, looking at a Coveo report earlier today, and you were talking a lot about huge gains that can be made just by refocusing on some, I hope it's okay to say, bread and butter things. Like, is this idea that, if you can get a couple of % increase in a few areas, all of that compounds and can really change the fortunes of a business very quickly. So looking for those areas that could be improved or revisited, really important. For people higher up in a business, maybe who want to become future-proof and make sure they're thriving in 2035, I would say one of the simplest, also hardest, but most important things to look at is to think about your KPIs and your accounting. Because even now, we run omni-channel sessions with retailers, and then they say to us, oh, we're not, our stores have to make money. Our stores have to pay for themselves. And that's the first thing to look at, because any omni-channel project is going to be held back if the rules or the rewards around how you're counting things aren't structured well. So that might be a cultural thing. It's kind of easy. Once you make that decision, it's quick to make it, but actually convincing everyone that that's what you're going to do is hard. But then once it's done, you can align everyone around working towards that omni-channel goal, which is hugely important. And then the other thing, I think, is it's actually a really good time to start playing around with some of these bleeding edge digital first opportunities. Because, I think to set up a space in any digital environment or metaverse, it doesn't have to cost a lot of money. Again, you can build a space based on one of these gaming engines. I heard that it can cost $50,000. Like, it doesn't have to cost a lot of money to experiment with some of this. And last time we talked about this company called Pietra, who, as well as making or helping people make items, they actually help people connect into global logistics. So actually, you can have your items go global overnight. So I would almost say, set aside some money that you can afford to lose, perhaps, and then go and see what can be done. So it's a really great time. And I would love to help people. I agree.
I think it's, you can innovate in different ways, right? You can innovate in ways like you were just saying, where you can just do what are the basics and you haven't got those right yet. That's still a form of innovation to get those sorted. Like, they need to be done, and make sure there's a team that can get that sorted. But then, there should be something set aside to try the slightly crazier stuff and see whether it has legs and see whether it could take the business somewhere. And even if it doesn't take it in the perfect direction of what you had planned at the start, you might find it impacts the business in a different way and gives up different ideas as to what could be done for a type of experience that you could give. that is scalable or maybe more efficient than the original version that you had. And I think that's super important. And interesting that you say about the KPIs. I've seen it before multiple times where people have the wrong structure set up to make, and the customer suffers, right? It's like, we want to hit our e-commerce target, and so therefore we want people to transact online, but actually that customer might want to do buy online, pick up in store, or only go and browse in store, but be directed to the closest store. And the teams need to be incentivized to do the right thing for the customer as a whole. And I've seen that plenty of times, and I agree entirely that you need to get that right. But it can be a difficult conversation to have because culturally the business might be siloed, and everyone's got their different targets, and I think that makes it very tricky.
Yeah.
We've spoken about quite a lot of things in this. We've gone from elements of metaverse all the way through to like what other industries are doing a good job, and where things can be blended together, sharing of data, and whether that should be customer owned entirely and then share with the brand. Out of kind of everything that we've discussed here, is there anything that kind of top of mind for you? We've discussed what people can do to try and take things away and think about what they can do, but what would be top of mind for you to pass on to a retailer to kind of wrap everything up here?
Well, thinking about the conversation we've had today and the conversation we had last time as well, I would still say focusing on that relationship first. So understanding your customer better than any other, just asking them what they want if you don't know, but having something that keeps customers coming back. So that's possibly offering more than just buying a product, but maybe some content or even a gaming experience, something like that. So relationships, I would say, is one. Digital first, I think, is another. I really think it's quite a fun exercise to do, but just for people to sit down, take a massive blank sheet of paper and think, what could I do? If I was starting again, what would I do? How would I connect with customers? How would I bring my brand to life? And then they can work backwards from that. So when you've got this dream digital first ecosystem, what can't it do? What do you actually need the store for? And this might be why we're seeing some retailers rework how they're using their stores at this point. And then also, I think that it all comes from an innovation mindset and the way you're rewarding people. So I should have said that first, but that comes first.
That's fine.
So, and it's blending the human and the tech, of course. You're actually using this amazing exponential technology to connect with people in a more human way than ever before. So, and yet you need to build that customer trust, connect on that human level. So do not forget the human.
Perfect. I couldn't agree more. Well, Cate, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much for your time and all of your insight. Wish you all the best, and we'll obviously chat again at some point and go into more detail on e-commerce. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. Thanks so much for having me. It's been great.
Thank you for listening. To hear more, subscribe to the Ecom Edge podcast today. Listen to us wherever you get your podcasts.